Chapter 7. A Whale of Unknown Species. Although Just was surprised by this unexpected fall, I nevertheless retained a very clear impression of my sensations. I first flee a depth of about 20 feet. I am a good swimmer, without pretending to equal Byron and Edgar Poe, who are masters in diving, did not make me lose my head. 2 vigorous heel strokes brought me back to the surface of the sea. My first care was to look for the eyes. The frigate, the crew had noticed my disappearance. The slab Lincoln had fired on board the commander Farragut. Was he putting a boat into the dock? See, I hoped to be saved. The darkness were deep. I glimpsed a black mass that disappeared to the east, and whose position lights hold them in the distance. It was the frigate. I felt lost, to me screaming. I was swimming towards Abraham Lincoln with a desperate arm. My clothes embarrassed me. The water stuck to my body. It paralyzed my movements flowed. I am Fauquet. To me it was the last shout that I jammed my mouth widening. I struggled. Another elder in the abyss. My clothes were seized by a vigorous hand. I felt violently brought back to the surface of the sea, and I heard, yes, I heard these words pronounced in my ear. If Mr. has the extreme kindness to lean on my shoulder, Mr. swim much more comfortable. I gripped with one hand the arm of my faithful counsel. You say, I myself answered the advice and orders of Mr. And this shock to hurry at the same time as me to the sea, in no way but being at the service of Mr. I followed Mr. The worthy boy found it quite natural, and the frigate asked me for the frigate, answered advice by turning on his back. I think that Mr. will do well not to rely too much on her. You say, I say that when I was rushing to the sea, I heard the men of bars crying out, the headles and the rudder are broken or breaking by the tooth. Of the monster, it is the only damage I think Abraham Lincoln was not proven. But circumstances unfortunate for us, he no longer governs, then we are lost. Maybe quietly answered advice. However, we still have a few hours ahead. And in a few hours we do many things. The imperturbable advice, cold blood, coming up. I swam more vigorously, but embarrassed by my clothes, which will squeeze me like a lead screed. I had an extreme difficulty to support myself advice, realizing that Mr. Allow me to make an incision to him, he says, and sliding an open knife under my clothes, and cracked them, up and down, with a quick blow. Then he rid me of it, stomach, while I swam for both of them. In my turn, I rendered the same service to counsel, and we continued to sail near each other. However, the situation was no less terrible. Perhaps our disappearance had not been, and Lutell was the frigate, could not come, back in the wind, to us being dismantled from its rudder. So we had to rely on his advise's boats to reason coolly in this hypothesis, and let us plan accordingly. Astonishing nature, this phlegmatic boy was there as at home. It was therefore decided that our only chance of salvation, being to be collected by the boats of Abraham Lincoln, we had to organize ourselves to wait for them as long as possible. I resolved then to divide our forces so as not to exhaust them simultaneously. And this was agreed, while one of us was stretched out on the back, would stand still with arms crossed, the other swam and would push him forward. This tugboat roll was not to last more than 10 minutes, and we relay. Thus, we could swim for a few hours, and maybe until sunrise. Faint chance, but hope is so strongly rooted in the heart of the man. Then we were two, finally, I affirm. Well, it seems unlikely. If I sought to destroy in me any illusion, if I wanted to despair, I could not. The collision of the frigate and cetacean had occurred around 11 o'clock in the evening, so I counted on 8 hours of swimming until the sunrise, rigorously practicable operation by relaying us the sea. It's beautiful, tired us little. Sometimes I sought to pierce with the gaze its thick darkness that only the phosphorescence caused by our movements broke. I watched these light waves that broke on my hand and whose shining tablecloth stained livid plates. We are not said to be immersed in a bath of mercury around 1 o'clock in the morning. I flee, preyed of extreme fatigue. My limbs would be under the fears of violent cramps. Advice to support me and the care of our conservation rested on him alone. I soon heard his boy to tea. The poor breathing became short and pressed. I understood that he could not resist long. Let me tell him, abandon it, sir. Never answered. He intends to drown well before him. At this moment, the moon appeared through the fringes of a big cloud that the wind was driving in the east. The surface of the sea is a this. Under its rays, this beneficent light revived our forces. My head straightened. But watch what carried to all points of the horizon. I saw the frigate. It was 5 miles from us and formed only a dark mass, barely appreciable, but of boat point. I wanted to scream what good device distances. My swollen lips did not let pass any his advice. More articulate, a few words, and I heard him repeat several times to us our movements. A suspended instant. We listened, and son, one of those buzzing whirls whose oppressed blood filled the ear. But it seems to me that a cry answered the cry of advice. Did you hear murmur? Yes, and advice, I await you. Space, a new desperate call. This time, no possible error. A human voice answered ours, and test the way of a wealthy person, abandoned in the middle of the ocean. What other victim of the shock experienced by the ship, or rather a boat of the frigate? We Christmas is not in the Shadow Council, made a supreme effort, and leaning on my shoulder, while I resisted in a last convulsion, he stood half an hour from the water and fell, exhausted. What have you seen? I saw, whispered he saw, but let us not speak, but let us keep all our strength. What had he seen? So I do not know why. The thought of the world came to my mind for the first time. But this voice, however the times are no longer, or the Jonas, take refuge in the belly of the whales, yet advice sometimes raised my head, look in front of him, and threw a cry of gratitude, to which answered a voice closer and closer. I could hardly hear it, but force was at the end. My fingers spread, my hand no longer provided me a point of support, my mouth convulsively open. Without pleasing, with salt water, the cold invaded me. I raised my head one last time, then I dressed, but in this instant, a hard body died. I clung to it. Then I felt like retreating, like bringing back to the surface of the water, that my chest deflated and I fainted. It is certain that I came back quickly to me, thanks to a big friction quote that amazes me. The body, I find nothing. The eyes, counsel whispered. I, Mr. Massenet, replied advice at this moment to the last clarity of the moon that was descending towards the horizon. I saw a figure that was not that of counsel, and that I recognize immediately, helps me, but cries in person, sir, and who runs after his premium, replied the Canadian. You were thrown into the sea to the shock of the frigate. Yes, Professor, but more favored that I could almost immediately get a foot on an island, floating an islet, or, to better say, on our island, narval, gigantesque. Explain you, net only, I soon understood why I bridge had no more to begin it, and it was blunt on his skin. Why, Ned? Why, what this beast there, Professor, is made of steel plate. I must recuperate my spirits, that I revise my memories, that I control myself. But assertion, the last words of the Canadian, had produced a reversal suffered in my brain. I was rapidly rising to the top of the being, or object, to be half immersed, that served us as a refuge. I was feeling it. Foot was obviously a body, hard, this soft, that forms the mass of large marine mammals, but this hard body could be a bone shell, similar to that of the haunted animals diluvians. And I will no leave to classify the monster among the amphibious reptiles, such as turtles or alligators. And well, not the black back that supported me was smooth, polished, unenleaved. It made to the shock a metallic sound, and so incredible that it seemed what I say of the facts of plates bolognese. The doubt was not possible. The animal, the monster, and misled the imagination sailors of both hemispheres. It was necessary to recognize it. It was a phenomenon even more astonishing, a phenomenon of man's hand. The discovery of the existence of the most fabulous mythological being. Nowhere to the same degree surprised my reason that what is prodigious come from the Creator. It is quite simple, but suddenly find before his eyes the impossible, mysteriously, and humanly realized. It was to confuse the mind. There was no hesitation. However, we were lying on the back of a kind of underwater boat, which presented, as much as I could judge, the form of a huge steel fish. The opinion of Ned Land was made on this point. Advice, and I only put ourselves in it. But then I say this aircraft containing him, a locomotion mechanism, and a crew to maneuver it. Obviously, replied the harper. Nevertheless, for 3 hours that I live, this floating island has not given sign of life. This boat did not walk. No, Mr. Scam. It is cradle at the will of the blades, but above mouth. Not we know, not to doubt, however, that he is gifted with a high speed, or as it takes a machine to produce this speed, and a mechanic to drive this machine. I conclude that we are saved from a reserved tone at the moment, and as to give reason to my argument, a bubbling was made at the back of this strange, appears, whose thruster was obviously a propeller, and it set in motion that the time to hang on to its upper part, which emerged about 80 centimeters. Very fortunately, its speed was not excessive. As long as it sails horizontally, murmura, Ned Land, I have nothing to say, but it takes the fantasy of diving. I will not give dollars for my skin. I again could have said the Canadian. It became urgent to communicate with any beings enclosed in the sides of this machine. I sought to his surface an opening, a panel, a manhole, to use the technical expression, but the bolt lines, firmly folded down on the joint of the sheets, was clear and uniform. Besides, the moon disappeared, then, and left us in a deep darkness. It was necessary to wait the day to notify, by way of entering inside this underwater boat, so our salvation depended only on the whim of the mysterious helmsmith who directed this apparatus, and if he dived, we were lost. This case, except I did not doubt the possibility of entering into relation with them, and indeed, if he did not make themselves their mother, it was necessary that it should be rebuilt from time to time on the surface of the ocean to renew their supply of breathable molecules. So necessity of an opening that put the inside of the boat in communication with the atmosphere. As to the hope of being saved by the Commander Farragut, it was necessary to give up completely. we were dragged westward, and I estimated that our relatively moderate speed reached 12 meshes. Wages the lilies beat the waves with a mathematical regularity, emerging a few times and causing the phosphorescent water to gush at a great height around 4 a.m. The speed of the apparatus increased. We resisted hardly this dizzying training when the blades beat us head-on. Fortunately, Ned met under his hand a large organo fixed to the upper part of the sheet metal back, and we managed to hold on firmly. Finally, this long night elapsed. My incomplete memory does not allow to trace all impressions. One single detail comes to mind. During some lulls of the sea and the wind, I cruise here. Several times, of vague sounds, a kind of fugitive harmony, produced by distant chords, which was therefore the mystery of this underwater navigation, whose whole world was vainly seeking the explanation of the strange beings living in this boat. What mechanical agent allowed him to move with a prodigious saw speed the day after the morning mists enveloped us? But it did not take long to tear. I was going to proceed to a careful examination of the hull, which formed at its upper part a kind of horizontal platform, when I felt it sink little by little. 1,000 devil is written in Ned Land, striking the sound sheet. So, navigator, not very hospitable, but it was difficult to be heard in the middle of the deafening beats of the propeller. Fortunately, the movement of immersion suddenly stopped. A sound of fitting violently produced inside the boat. A plaque lifted up. A man who appeared to throw a bizarre scream and disappeared immediately, moments after. 8 solid Gaillard, the veiled face appeared silently and dragged us into their formidable machine.